This episode of The Ride is brought to you by Purina. The PhD equine nutritionists at Purina Animal Nutrition tackle problems using science, and their love of horses keeps them at it until they get it right. Even with the most established feeds, they keep innovating. Even when it takes years of research, they don't stop until it's right. They're dedicated to the scientific method, but it can't capture the feeling of seeing a horse reach their full potential. It takes science and love to help your horse live their best life. Put their research to the test at horseinnovation.com. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of The Ride. This is Jillian. I'm here with my co-host Nichole, and today we're sitting down with Brandi Phillips, who is a professional trick riding performer and a coach. So Brandi, thank you so much for being with us today. I'm going to let you kind of go into detail about what you do because it's just so fascinating. And so if you could just tell us a little bit about your trick riding career.
Yeah, thank you for having me on here. So I am a professional trick rider and trick roper / Western performer, kind of done a little of whip cracking and any and everything. I have done it since I was 12 years old. I started out with a group called Riata Ranch out of California. And then in 2016, I retired from the team and have since been doing more stuff on my own and teaching as well.
So you mentioned you were at Riata Ranch, which I think is a pretty famous, it has a huge history, right? Like it's not just trick riding. They do all sorts of stuff there. I think we've even maybe covered it in the travel section of our magazine. But how did you originally get into the horses? Were your family horse people, or like what was that first true love, I'm going to ride horses kind of moment?
I actually don't remember. My grandmother, when I was young, had a horse ranch. And she talks about me going around the ranch and doing chores with her. I don't really remember it. And then when she sold the ranch because my grandfather was sick, I really wasn't around. I wasn't raised. I wouldn't say I was raised around horses. I wasn't raised taking care of animals. I wasn't raised riding. But my grandma, every once in a while, as I got older, would take me somewhere to ride. She had one of her best friends. Her name was Connie. She taught me most of my early on riding, which was actually English. And so any contact I had was just on and off that way. My mother was actually a trick rider at Riata Ranch as well, but I did not grow up, with her doing that. So when I was 12, my younger sister was actually supposed to be doing riding lessons out there. And because my mom had already paid her tuition and she had to leave for the summer, Jennifer had approached me one day out at the ranch and asked if I wanted to, finish her summer out. And I said, okay, well, yeah, I have a riding background, though. I don't really want to ride, with the little kids. And she's like, no, come out Tuesdays and Thursdays. We do the trick riding. Just come out and try it out. And the first day I went out there, they had this horse named Tomahawk. He was a little white Appaloosa. He happened to be blind, but they still used him for training on a lunge line. And she's explaining to me, she's got this horse out there and all the girls lined up. And she's explaining to me how to vault. And I just ran up beside this horse and vaulted on. And then I never left. It just kind of accidentally happened.
So, okay, you talk about just like going up to this horse and vaulting on it. I would assume there has to be some kind of athletic ability that comes with this. I can't imagine just anybody being able to get up to a horse and just kind of jump on. Did you do any other kind of did you do gymnastics or anything that kind of prepared you for this? Or was it really just a moment where you were like, I'm just going to get on this horse?
All my siblings were athletes, played sports, every sport you can think of, they all played. I played some softball. I was average. But I did it mostly because it was something I did with my dad. When we went out to Riata, I'd never tried trick riding. I never thought about trying trick riding. And I'm sure Jennifer loves to tell this story, but I literally did. She explained to me how to do it and I just vaulted on. And then trick riding became an absolute passion of mine. It was something I was good at right off the bat. Not that I didn't have to work for it, but I found that I had a natural ability to do it. Even as tall, I'm tall for a trick rider, even as tall as I am, it just was something I finally found that was for me. And I wasn't going to my sister's, sporting events anymore. They were starting to come to my shows. And, I found it was just my niche, and it just ignited a passion. And I actually didn't trick ride for probably a year and a half in a show, but I started out with the trick roping because I knew that's the fastest way I could get to performing, and I could wear the really cool outfits. And then I worked really hard at being a good trick roper. And then it developed into the trick riding as my skills got better.
Could you explain a little bit just about the trick roping? I'm not super familiar, so I think some of our listeners might not be either.
Absolutely. So the type of trick roping I do was first made famous by Will Rogers, and we use a cotton trick rope. And you just do different maneuvers, vertical, horizontal loops. You kick your legs over them. I mean, all these really, really cool maneuvers that are now, it's kind of a dying art. There's not a ton of trick ropers because it's really, really hard to learn. At Riata, Jennifer has created a really cool, well, I believe Tom created it before Jennifer, but Jennifer really fine-tuned it. She created level tests at Riata, and so you had to learn each skill without messing your rope up, and you got tested on it. Well, then it added that little competitiveness with your peers, the other students, so it kind of motivated you to learn to rope. So then by the time you get to where you're performing these rope tricks, you're really, really proficient at them, and you don't really lose your motivation because you're competing against the other students, and you want to be the first one to pass your test and have bragging rights. And if it hadn't been set up that way, I don't know that I would have learned to trick rope because the girls tease me because I was the trick rider, and now I actually do more trick roping than I do trick riding right now. So the girls kind of laugh at me for that, but it's a really, really cool skill that I'm very privileged to have learned. And anyone that wants to try it, I say try it, because once you learn it, you're so happy that you can do it, because it is a fun thing to do.
Now, you've talked a little bit about Riata and your history there. For those that aren't familiar, do you want to kind of go into a little more detail about what it is? Because what I'm familiar with is that they've done trick riding, they do the trick roping, they do Roman riding, and then a little bit of everything else. I mean, it is a very diverse ranch, but you guys have a trick riding troupe that is pretty popular across the country and maybe even the world. But can you kind of go into detail a little bit more about what Riata Ranch is and kind of how it became to be?
Yeah, so Riata Ranch was originally started in 1957 by a man named Tommy Meyer, who was a calf roper, a horseman. He was a stuntman. He had a really, really cool background, and he actually got hurt where he couldn't compete anymore. I think he blew his knee out, and back then they couldn't do what you can do now. And so he started this ranch where I think he was mostly just local parents that wanted their kids to learn to ride. He just took on all these students. Well, he was such a visionary and creative person. He basically taught all these aspects of ranch work and horsemanship, and it just kind of started growing to where then he had horse show teams. I mean, they raced ostriches. They did anything and everything, and he just made them these really well-rounded hands. But he was also teaching them life lessons, because he knew most of those kids were not going to go on to have rodeo careers or ranching careers. He was more concerned about creating better people and that teaching you skills that you would use down the road. And so fast forward, he had all these horse show teams and junior rodeo teams. He decided to add trick riding. And so he started the trick riding team, which is where Jennifer originally first started. And she was on the 4 original girls. And that's where the trick riding team became then the forefront, as horse show teams became expensive and showing in general became expensive. It kind of transitioned over to women and trick riding. And then since then, Riata's had hundreds and hundreds of girls and teams on the road, and you name it, Riata Ranch has probably done it. Any event around the world. I actually was listening to a podcast last night with Kansas Carradine, who I've gotten to perform with, but she's a generation above me. And listening to even her story that I already kind of knew, we all have this same experience, no matter what generation you were from, because the basis of Riata is about the life lesson stuff. It is about the what you're going to do after. And then it's really cool to hear that every person that's been through Riata has been able to take that and go, you know, some Riata girls are in the fashion industry. I mean, it's so, there's so many aspects to it. It's so hard to package it up into one, but that's, I think, what makes girls stay and makes you stay for so long. And I'm one of two girls from my original generation that stuck with it and made a career out of it. And Jennifer actually took over after the founder passed away. And she actually was only supposed to fulfill a few contracts. And then she found herself with 20 students and starting over. And I kind of was with Jennifer through her journey of taking that over and through 4 different ranches and bouncing around. And now Jennifer just finally bought Riata Ranch a home and has rebuilt the entire program since I've been with her, and is doing really, really well now. And is really, I think Tom would be very proud of her taking something and continuing on with his vision.
Well, and like you had said, it's a team kind of environment, and you don't really get that as much in the horse industry as you would if you were playing soccer or softball or basketball or whatever. And so I imagine that it's really cool having that team atmosphere, and then also knowing there are so many girls and women out there who have been part of this team, and it's like you kind of have your own network that you can kind of network through and meet people in so many different aspects of not even just Western lifestyle and culture, but like the entire industry, like different industries and all around the world.
Yeah, 100%. There's I can't even tell you how many times you come across someone that's been in Riata that you don't, obviously never met, but then get to talking to them, and it's literally the same thing. And it's this big family, and you always can go back to Riata. And that's another cool thing. A lot of us go back there and perform. Jennifer will still call and say, hey, I need you for something. I need you for this. It doesn't matter what generation you were in. You always get to come home to Riata, and there's always opportunity. And I think that's what differs Riata's experience as opposed to just going to learn to trick ride, because Riata takes on the business aspect of it and the responsibility of owning everything and getting down the road. So you get to learn all that stuff without the responsibility of you actually having to do all that. And so then when you move on, and, for me personally, I've already learned all those things. So as an adult, it's almost harder for me to get along with other adults my age, because there's a lot of people out there that don't know that stuff that I almost took for granted, because I just assumed everybody learned that way. And so my trick riding experience is much different than someone who's maybe just started trick riding and going to rodeos. And I think it just makes it so much more special, because it's not about the trick riding. It's about everything else that came with it.
It seems like they've certainly produced so many different kinds of, young women that have, just are able to take that experience and go so many different avenues of life, which is really, really a really cool idea, thinking that they have they all have a similar background, but they all are applying it different ways. So when you were talking about, the competing and the shows and things like that, is that something that you guys as a team compete and you travel, or what is that part of it like? At
Riata, we actually, when I was younger, Jennifer still had we do a Riata only horse show between just Riata students. So we used to do stuff like that. But as far as going to rodeos, we actually didn't do a lot of that when I was younger. Jennifer was kind of rebuilding after Tom passed. And so we would take 3 months to get ready to go to an equine affair. And as we got older, Jennifer ended up with these girls. She used to get asked all the time if she helped troubled teens. And because she always had myself and a couple other girls that all our parents happened to be going through some hardships. So it was like they kind of dropped us off with Jennifer and was like, please take our kids, do whatever with them. And Jennifer's like, well, where do you guys want to go? And So we made these goals of going to rodeos, and we wanted to do circuit finals, and we wanted to do NFR. And Jennifer straight up told us, well, you're not good enough to go do those. So you're going to have to work really hard to do that. So in 2008, 7 and 8 is when we started doing pro rodeos. And I was about 17, 18 then. And within a year, we had our first California Circuit Finals rodeo. And so it was pretty cool because even though as kids, we were all going through these things with our families, like that kept us so focused and gave us a goal and going down the road and doing things to where then Regatta, this generation of rodeo got to see a new era of regatta trick riding that hadn't been around in a while. And because back in the 80s, when NFR first went to Vegas, regatta did the openings, and my mom trick rode there. And so regatta has such a history in so many different area aspects of horse, even equine affairs and equitanas and, rodeo, that's that team building and team going all together. Like it just made our experience that much more.
Now, do you remember your first pro rodeo event? Was there anything that kind of stood out? Like I made it, like this is where I want to be kind of moment?
Because I didn't really grow up in rodeo, I don't think I realized. So one of the bigger rodeos we got was Pendleton. And I was 17 the first time we did Pendleton. And, the big grass. And I was on the perfect horse to be at that arena because Willie, he was this big, massive paint horse that loved to run. And I was always the first horse, and wherever I pointed him, he'd run straight across that arena and just go as fast as he could. But I didn't realize what Pendleton was at that time. Now looking back, I'm like, wow, that was pretty cool. And I didn't even realize the magnitude of it. It wasn't until later as I got older and more involved in rodeo, mostly because that's just what we got into doing. Now I look back and realize wow, that was actually pretty cool. Like we really did accomplish quite a few big things in a short period of time as a young team. And yeah, I didn't even realize what we were doing until we were doing it.
I couldn't imagine. I mean, Pendleton is just such an iconic, that Green Mile, it's just an iconic rodeo to be able to perform there and then not even realize I'm a part of this, super historical event that people from all over the world come to. And wow.
Yeah, I had no clue. I was green as that grass we were running across.
So as far as the horses that you're using, when you're a kid first starting, did you use regatta horses or do you have to eventually get your own? How does that work?
No, regatta actually provides all the animals. You can't. Now she has some girls that will buy their own horses, which is better for Jennifer's feed bill. But regatta provides all that for you, but Jennifer makes you train your horses. And at least we had to train ours, and because she had a lot of green horses then. And it's still true that day. She's at the end of the day, horsemanship is her number one priority when it comes to trick riding. She does not want you just running your horse around the arena and hanging off of them with it willy-nilly. There's a long process that she makes you go through with your animal. So by the time your horse is finished, they're really broke and they're really safe and they will take care of you. And so you go through this system. Everything at regatta has a system. So whether it's trick roping, trick riding, raking the lane, cleaning stalls, there's a system to everything that regatta does. And we do that with the horses as well. And so you start them as a team, and then individually she kind of pairs you up with which horses to ride. But then you have to ride all the horses though. She says any horse, anywhere, anytime, and you have to be able to ride every horse on that ranch and get something done. So she creates really well-rounded horsewomen as well. And I still use that process today, training, trick riding horses. And because you can't go just buy one, even as big as the trick riding community is now, you still probably want to buy something or you still want to get a horse that you made because you know what you can do and trust it. So I've gotten to ride really, really great horses. And, I'm actually retiring my horse Apollo this year. I've had him for 10 years and it's a pretty cool it's a pretty cool relationship to have because they truly aren't, they can't depend on you to tell them what to do. You truly have to trust those horses to do their job while you're hanging upside down or jumping on and off.
So when you're looking at prospect horses for trick riding, what is like your go-to requirements when you're trying to find a prospect? I would imagine it's probably a lot different than what I'm looking for in like a reining horse.
Like any horse, I say broke. You want a horse that's been there, done that a little bit. You know, at least I say the best horses to go for are about 7 to 9 years old, just because most of them have been somewhere. But mostly horses that don't mind you being in their space is a lot better way to start. Although I feel like every horse I've had have not been that way and have just turned out to be good trick riding horses. But in general, you got to have something very stout, you know, big boned that's going to withstand that. Because if you're hanging off the side of them, you know, it's not very comfortable, and they've got to be able to, you're hanging off this way, they got to be able to go the opposite way, you know, to brace for the weight. So honestly, it's just, you kind of just, I don't know, you just come across those horses and you'd actually be surprised what horses take to trick riding horses and what don't. But I'd say if you want a shorter training process, you got to find one that's not afraid to be in your pocket a little bit and does not care about whatever side of their body you're on, because they've got to be comfortable with it all.
I can imagine. I never would have even thought about that. But I mean, yeah, you have to be able to like literally climb and flip all over them. Have you throughout your career had any horses that have really stood out to you, have really, you know, kind of left a special place in your heart?
I've had 3 really good horses. Cisco Kids Checks, he actually passed away last year at 25. He was my first trick riding horse. So he was like, you know, my first love. I was 12 and wrote I Love Cisco on everything. But my next horse, Willie, he was my challenge horse. He was a big, stout, sorrel and white paint that we got him. He was donated and he broke every cross tie in his barn, kicked a hole through the round pin. I mean, he was a really pissed off horse, I'm going to be honest, very mad. And Jennifer, she brought him home and just said, we're just going to clean his stall and turn him out, clean his stall and turn him out. And then eventually he kind of softened, and I don't know, I don't know if being around kids, you know, she obviously isn't going to put us in a dangerous situation, but I think there was something about him being just left alone and kids coming in and out of his stall and being kind to him. He softened, and over time, somehow he became my horse. And Jennifer tended to put me on the hotter, harder to manage personalities. And Willie was kind of that way. He would just, if he was uncomfortable about something, he would definitely let you know. But he was a big powerhouse. Like, you couldn't rein that horse back. But he and I just got along so well. And he was such a big, soft, kind-hearted horse that he just eventually was the quietest in the station. That's where the horses start out when we trick ride. You'll see them do their pattern and they go around the arena and come back. That's called our station. And Willie would just be dead quiet, eyes closed. And when then it was his turn, all of a sudden he just ignited and he'd just barrel around that arena and then come back and just be quiet. And like I loved him. He was I would say my heart horse. And then the next horse I got was Jesse, and he was a little bay and white paint. Willie got really sour and needed a break. So Jennifer's like, we're not going to take him on the road. We're going to leave him home. You're going to ride Jesse. Well, at the time, Jesse, he wasn't going to hurt you, but he was kind of a runaway. He just was running and you did your tricks. And I'm like, okay, I guess okay, all right. So I'd stand up on him, and if I leaned too far forward, he'd kind of buck, but he was never dishonest about anything. And then, I don't know, eventually him and I just clicked. We got each other, and then he was the one that made me good. And he was the one at Reno Rodeo, like my memories of that feeling of hitting that arena, knowing I was going to nail it. My horse took care of me. Like he's the one that made me a great trick rider. And then the horse I have now, Apollo, he's kind of not the greatest trick riding horse I've ever had, but he's the one that's been with me through some really trying times in the last 7 years. And so he's my soul horse. Like, he took care of me and took on things that I put on him because I was going through a hard time. And he's like the one that I don't care if I don't ever trick ride again. I will work so he can live in that pasture and eat and be taken care of. And so, yeah, I've had just these horses that all have impacted me in different ways. And yeah, I don't know what I would have done without those horses, because I've gone through some pretty hard things at home. And so each one of those horses were put in my life for a specific reason, I say. Again, not about the trick riding. It just happened to be what I was doing.
Oh my God, absolutely. I can totally relate to that, though. Like, when you're going through some tough times, especially as a kid, and you truly do not fully understand what's going on, it's, really comforting to know that you always had that horse to connect with, because you just need it. Kind of going back to what you were talking about with your station and what you guys would do in practice, can you kind of break down how a trick riding practice would go about? I obviously have seen trick riding at rodeos and at events and on TV, but I've never fully gotten to see the training aspect of it. Can you kind of break down how a training run goes for you?
Yeah, well, every trick rider has their own, way to go about things. Obviously, I learned at Riata, so I do everything the Riata way. We, again, do everything as a team. We train as a team, and, you're paired up with your horses. And, we'd start out with our warm-ups and, getting yourself warmed up, horses warmed up. And then we do that same process of, like, we're in the show. A lot of the times we would spend time just doing our trick riding pattern, mostly to teach those horses to be quiet in the station, because we don't want a lot of chaos. We want our horses to be very quiet. So sometimes some practices, depending on the horses, would be spent just doing that pattern, making sure every horse was leaving quiet in their left lead and then making a nice pattern. And then Jennifer would kind of develop into our tricks, or a lot of the times we would do a lot of vaulting, because vaulting is a very good basis for everything. And that's where you hit the ground and land back in the saddle. So we do a lot of vaulting. And as far as when we're getting ready for a show, then we would develop into our tricks. But a lot of it is just keeping our horses' minds sound and just keeping them patterned well and knowing their job and making sure that we're doing right by them, not the other way around. Because Jennifer does not want a bunch of horses standing outside the gate, running people over. She wants everything quiet and good. So when you're getting ready for your tricks and getting in and out of your straps, it's safe. And so, and even building up to training one from the ground up, we start off on a lunge line and just teach the horse to keep moving while we start vaulting on and off, and we try to keep everything to the horse's advantage, not necessarily our own. It's not about us. And then, we develop our trick riding skills as on a fake horse, a vaulting barrel, and then, develop then to the horse that way. And then you start doing the patterns with the tricks. So we break everything down: walk, trot, elope. And a lot of people actually don't do that. They just want them to really lope and just do the pattern, but we don't want that. My horse has got to be able to do a big arena and run fast, and then they've got to do a small arena and run slower sometimes. So they start thinking about you and not just about, they're not running blind. So our practices are based around that and just doing that over and over and over and over again, pretty much.
I mean, I just love hearing about how the horsemanship that you develop, working with these horses. But, one thing that I've kind of always wondered about when you're performing is how much are you cueing the horse when you're performing? Are you just kind of doing your thing while you're up there and they know what they're supposed to be doing? Or how does that really work?
You're ultimately working towards them knowing their job and being independent thinkers, because they not only have to be able to take care of that when you're trick riding, but they also have to be able to think through if something does go wrong and knowing where to be if that happens. So another advantage to the station is if I fall completely off or I'm hung up, the horse is always going to go back to the other horses, no matter what. So that's a safety thing as well. And they do over time, and I think it's just with anything, when a horse knows their job and they're happy doing their job, I like to emphasize that a lot. They're happy doing it. Willie used to adjust his speed to what tricks I did, because in the shows we generally did, I had our assigned tricks that Jennifer would assign us. And Willie, he would kind of he'd go a slower, nice speed for hippodrome because he knew I was just standing up. But then if I went into my full fender, he went as fast as he could, and he adjusted for every trick. And you can't teach you can't teach those things. They just over time develop that. But that's what you're working towards, is they have to be independent thinkers and they're on you at all times. And a good example, a lot of my pictures on Apollo, my gray horse, he'll always have one ear turned on me because I might talk to him during a run, if I need him to slow up or something. But you have to just let them free. You have to trust your training in that process, and they've got to do it. And because you're thinking about trick riding, especially the kind of tricks I do where I'm doing a split the neck. I hit the ground and land backwards on the neck. I don't have time to think about what my horse is doing. So that's kind of the goal there.
We've talked a lot about the training side for the horses, but what you're doing is insanely physical. And I imagine it takes a lot of training outside of just riding. Do you have are you working out all the time? Do you do a lot of, any kind of tumbling, or how do you kind of stay fit outside of just riding to do these kinds of stunts?
I'm actually the worst person to ask because I do not like going to the gym or working out. The girls used to make so much fun of me for that. Well, with the training process, I honestly was able to stay physically fit mostly doing that. Not that I didn't need to do any extra, but we were so busy, running beside and vaulting on, and what you're using is your upper body and your core. So just by doing that, and even just doing ranch work, when you're moving hay or we're raking up Jennifer made us rake everything. So every time you go to the barn, it's spick and span, and it has a beautiful raking pattern. So that kind of stuff just kind of kept us physically fit. Now, as I've gotten older, I've had to do a little bit extra, but in general, I also know my body and I know what I can withstand. So I just try not to eat terribly. And, when I know I need to get ready for a show, I definitely take a little bit better care. I go out in the arena and vault and just start retraining my body and doing a lot of muscle memory. So you should work out, but I don't.
I love the honesty. I truly do.
I can very much relate to that.
I've always actually wanted to maybe go to a gymnastics gym and train a little bit like a gymnast, because that's so cohesive with trick riding, I think, with the strength and being able to have to hold things and body control. But it's really hard to find a gymnastics gym that will just let you come in and just not necessarily do gymnastics, but just work out with them.
The fact that you're able to do and learn all of that just, at the barn and on a horse, that's crazy to me. I just would have thought that you would have learned that in a gym or something. But that's so impressive that you learned all of those tricks, on the horseback. That's crazy.
Yeah, I wish I could take credit for that, but it's really the way Jennifer really trained us. And, I wish I could show you video of how it's done. Because if you watched one of our training sessions, you would be like, okay, I get it. Because she made us, she even made us we had to do horsemanship patterns, but she'd be like, okay, you're going to walk here, pick up the trot, then you're going to get off, run beside your horse and timing here. And then you're going to pick up the lope and do circles. And then you're going to do 3 vaults down this fence. So she'd created these different things like that. So you're having to ride and you're having to trick ride. So you're building the foundation of your physical fitness. You're building your mental strength. And then your horses are also, it's challenging them to not just think about running, right? That breaks down. So they're really cued into you. You're cued into them. And it's a pretty incredible training program. And I really do think a lot of trick riders, whether you already know how to trick ride, would really benefit from the way she teaches all of us.
That's fascinating. I love hearing that. It's almost, I mean, it's very similar to you're kind of riding and working out all at the same time. I mean, it's a little bit of everything when you're doing that kind of stuff. So we've talked a lot about your time at Riata, but you mentioned at the beginning of our interview that you retired from them and then went out on your own. What was the deciding factor on that? And you know, where did your career take you post Riata Ranch?
So my dad passed away in 2014, and I kind of struggled through the rest of that year dealing with that. And the next year, 2015, I kind of moseyed along and kind of felt okay until I guess maybe just not really dealing with it, because my dad passed away, and then 2 weeks later I was at a rodeo after cleaning his house out and, you know, doing the service, and I just kind of moved on and had to just go forward with life. And I just got so, I would say, burnt out is probably what I felt. And one thing about Riata is it's really not set up for adults. And, you know, as you're welcome to, but my life kind of was dedicated to Riata and wasn't really dedicated to what I was going to do after Riata. So I kind of was going through this hard time with that. And then I was getting really burnt out on, okay, what am I doing for me? And that is no dig at Riata whatsoever. It's a kids program, and I was lucky enough to stay through that. But then it was kind of when I got to go, okay, what about me? What am I really doing? And so and Jennifer was just so supportive of it when the girls are supposed to go to Oregon, and I told her, I said, I cannot get in the pickup, Jennifer. I said, I physically just makes me sick. I said, I cannot. I said, I think I need to go do something else. Like, I'm not okay, is basically what I told her. And she absolutely was like, oh, all right, what are you going to do? What's your plan? You know? And I said, well, I got this job offer in Arizona for Judy and Ozzie Gillum. And I had gone to work for them the winter before, and they raised driftwood team roping horses is mainly what they've done. And so I was going to go do something totally different. I was moving out of state, and I was going to leave it. I packed up my car and left everything I know, and I went to Arizona. And I think that's when, looking back now, I really think God just was isolating me, because he knew I was white knuckling life at that point. And so I got put in Arizona. I don't really necessarily think for my career. But over time, Judy and Ozzie were so great, because I could be very open with them about what I was going through. Because there was some days where I'm just like, I don't know what I don't think I can do anything today, you know. And they would be like, okay, well, let's go to town and look at the flea market, you know. Just, they were so awesome in helping me kind of navigate that and work and, you know, have a safe place. And I got to learn to team rope, which I love to rope. And then people started asking me, would you come trick ride, you know, for us, or, you know? And I was like, no, I'm done trick riding. I'm not going to do that anymore. Well, then I started getting lots of kids wanting to learn in Arizona. So, and I didn't have Apollo at the time. I left Apollo at Riata because Jennifer owned all the horses, and he actually was really lame at the time and thought we had a career-ending injury. And Jennifer gave him to me, which was a pretty incredible thing to do. And so we got him sound enough. And next thing you know, he doesn't even seem like anything's wrong with him. So I just started teaching. And then next thing I know, I got a rodeo, and then I got a show, and I just kind of developed back into it. And I just kind of started doing stuff on my own and on my own accord, and figuring that out, which is totally different than being on a team. You know, everything's on me. And so I had to develop my show for one person and I did more demos. So I really loved having to show trick riding in a way people don't get to see. And so post Riata, that's kind of what my career is more developed into, is showing the horsemanship aspect of it. And I have done some rodeos and performances, but most of my shows were that kind of stuff. Art of the Cowgirl had me their first 2 years, and they were so awesome. And I got to take a green horse, which is Judy and Ozzie's horse, that you could rope on, but I started trick riding on her and I took her places. And then during the pandemic, I kind of got to where I was mentally better. I was motivated to do stuff. And I was like, if I'm going to stay in trick riding, if I'm going to stay roping, I want to do it for me. And I want to train my own horses and I want to do my own. And Judy and Ozzy, when I was talking to them about it, they're like, okay, well, where are you going to go next? And I'm like, I think I'm going to go to Texas. So because I felt I could do everything here in Texas. And one of my good friends, Sadie, we'd always wanted to do things together. And she had always been in Texas. I was always in California or on the West Coast, and we could never get together. And so Sadie was like, please move to Texas. I will help you get developed here. I got plans. And so during the pandemic, when all my shows got canceled, I packed up, moved out here to Texas, and I've been here ever since and have been, for the first time in my adult life, anything I do is now for me. Any shows I go do, I don't live at a ranch on someone else's ranch. And so that's kind of what my life is developed into. And so now trick riding for me and performing is much different than what it was previously. So I'm not going to lie, sometimes there's days where I could care less if I trick rode. And then some days I miss it. And I've given myself a lot of leeway to realize that trick riding when I was younger was a kind of a survival. It was my motivating for life. Whereas now trick riding is just because I love trick riding. And it's developing into, I can't really tell you. I'm not really going and beating down the pavement, especially Apollo's going to retire this year. So I've gone more into teaching and I want to do right by my horse. And he's gotten to where I think he's tired of it finally now. I mean, he's 18 years old or about 18. And so now trick riding horses is just kind of whatever I want it to be at this point. And I'm trying to have my cake and eat it too. I want to enjoy it, but I don't want to be so tied to it, or I don't want my life to depend on it. And so really, Riata and going to Arizona has just kind of helped me find my confidence as a person, and, having to deal with what life throws at you. That's kind of what it is now. And now I'm just involved in many different aspects of rodeo and the Western industry. And so Texas, I've been doing all kinds of different really random jobs and random stuff, and trick roping a lot more.
That's really a fascinating story. I relate so much to the whole just getting burnt out on it. I showed very competitively as a kid. And by the time I was 18, I was just burnt out. And I was like, what am I going to do with my life? Where is this going? And, went to college, stepped away from the horses, did not want to get a horse related job, and then somehow ended up at Horse and Rider. And obviously I never left. So, but it introduced me to a new side of horse showing that I loved, and a new discipline. And now it's just like that, where you do it because you love it. You don't do it because you feel like you have to, or you're trying to prove anything or any of that. You do it because you truly love it. You're in it because you care about horses. You're doing right by your horse, retiring him because you can feel that he's just not in it anymore. And I relate so much to that. So you said you're coaching a little bit. Are you coaching younger kids? Are you mentoring? Are you just kind of offering advice to people who are on the rodeo circuit?
I have, right now I have 2 regular students who are beginners. And Apollo loves kids. So I'm like, well, I don't want him just sitting out there because, old horses don't do anything. They tend to all of a sudden get old, real old. And so Apollo's teaching them, and he loves it. He doesn't have to go very fast, and he has these little kids that give him treats and stuff. So I'm working with them. And then there's one other girl who already kind of trick rides, and she's come to me a few times, and we mostly worked on her horse because she can physically, learning tricks for her isn't going to be hard, but her horse kind of was running out from underneath her. And so I kind of developed that same system that I learned at Riata with her horse. And now her and that horse are just so cohesive. And I actually don't love teaching beginners. It's hard for me and I hate to say that, but I do think there's special people that teach beginners and love to teach beginners. I feel like I'm more suited to teach, intermediate to advanced riders, but it's really mostly, it's just so good for Apollo, and I don't mind it at all. I'd rather teach them and them learn a good, safe way and learn on a safe horse. And eventually I would love to have a few more horses, if stuff does come up, or, so I can have a little string that people can learn on. But like I said, being out here by myself now and developing, I've got to get my own place and, do all the adult stuff. So it's very small, but it's still really rewarding, and it keeps Apollo going really well, and it makes him happy. So if he's happy, I'm happy.
I love that. I love that, you're just living your best life so Apollo can live his best life.
Yeah, it's a good trade.
That's all that matters. The most important part. Well, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us today. I mean, I learned so much. I think everything that you're doing is so fascinating, and I really just love what you guys are doing. So do you have any, like where our listeners can find you on social media or anything that you'd like to, give a shout out?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Brandi Phillips. Mostly Instagram is probably a better place to follow me. Facebook, I have private mostly, for family and close friends. But Instagram, I post stuff on there. It's mostly horses and dogs and trick riding. And then also my friends and I have a social media company called Calamity Media. You can follow us on that as well. Like, we're always doing stuff and with our clients, and then for everything that we do, because Sadie is also a trick rider, so we get to do a lot of fun stuff. So you can follow our team on there.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on. We're so excited that we could finally make this happen. I know we had we were playing a tag for a little bit trying to get this lined up, but I'm so happy that this all came together, and thank you again for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you guys for tuning into the Ride Podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and please be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow Horse and Rider Magazine on social media and find us at horseandrider.com.
If you guys have any questions or comments, please be sure to hit us up at horseandrider@equinenetwork.com. We want to hear from you guys.
And if you like what you're listening to, be sure to leave us a review on iTunes.